Hey everyone, welcome to the March 2024 income report for my heavily edited AI blog case study site. For those of you not familiar, my name is Casey and I'm the founder of bloggingguide.com. This case study will take you through the process of me building a site in the arts and crafts niche from $0 and 0 page views a month to as far as I can take the site. I've done this before with a few other blogs, and I got a lot of positive feedback from people on YouTube who found it useful. So I decided to try to replicate the success again. So if you enjoy this type of content, be sure to like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy this video. I'm going to give you just a quick overview about the site and the domain and just, help contextualize where it is today. If you want to learn more kind of about the theory and some of the details of the site, I covered this a bit more in depth in the first video in this series, which if you want to check out, I'll link in the description below. So I purchased the domain in 2023. It was a fresh domain, meaning no one else had owned it. No one else had ever built a site on it. There was no real history with it. It was just a $10 domain on Namecheap. The site itself was actually launched that same month in January of 2023. So a few days after purchasing the domain, I started publishing posts. Typically, I do more of a ramped up process where I build a shell site first and I sort of seed the site with content and see kind of how it does. In this case, I was already pretty confident in the keyword research and sort of niche validation I had done. So I knew the traffic was there. I didn't know if I could rank for it, but I kind of wanted to get this one going. So since I had a clear plan in mind, I started publishing posts right away. Like I said, within a few days of purchasing this domain. The site was accepted into Mediavine last month, February of 2024. And this month in March, this is the first full month of data and earnings with Mediavine that I'll have for this site. The site, while I'm not going to disclose it here, just to deter copycats and spammers and all that, it is in the arts and crafts niche. It's in a subset of the arts and crafts niche, but yeah, it pretty generally could be classified as that. That's like literally the ComScore category that Mediavine assigned to this site. And as far as like how much content is on the site, there's still about 500 posts. I was planning on adding some more posts this month, but then the March core update and spam updates together on March 5th sort of made me pause everything, as it created a lot of chaos, as I'm sure many of you have seen on Twitter or YouTube. Lots of sites were sort of crushed by this update. So I decided to pause publishing this month just until this update was over and to kind of see where things landed. So it wouldn't be a case study and true income report without accounting for the costs. So again, the domain was just a $10 domain. That's annually $10 on Namecheap. The hosting and theme together work out to about $25. And there's so far I've used about $345 worth of koala credits. And those are a one-time prepaid amount of credits. I actually still have more of those left, but just for simplicity's sake, I'll call it $345 that I've spent, even though there's still more credits to use. So in total, the site so far has cost me around $760. So the goal is obviously to make at least this amount of money, hopefully significantly more long term. Most of these costs will basically remain fixed. I don't plan on adding a huge amount of content at this point. I doubt I'll even add more than another $700 of koala writer content. So if that remains constant, really it'll just be adding $25 a month to sort of keep things running for the hosting and theme. So yeah, this is just a good example of how cheap and cost effective digital based business can really be. So here's a screenshot of my Mediavine earnings. Obviously in January it's zero because the site wasn't accepted at that point. February was the first partial month that the site was approved for Mediavine. So it did a little over $50. Nothing to write home about, but a big deal to get any site on Mediavine. Even as someone who has 4 or 5 sites at any given time on Mediavine, and maybe three now three on Raptive, I I still get very excited every time I onboard a new site because with these premium ad networks, you can just get so much higher of a RPM. That's the revenue per thousand page views or sessions. So it's always exciting to get a new site. And as you can see, it can start to ramp up quickly. So in March of 2024, the first full month, the site did about $635. Now, I mean, first of all, I think this is good, but to contextualize it a little bit, the typically when you onboard a site, just doing kind of the basic math with Mediavine, because usually you need 50,000 sessions, this amount's going to be higher. Usually your first full month might, for me, be more like 1 to almost 3,000. This site, if you remember, as I explained in the first video, was something that I was able to get into early. I only had to get to 25,000 sessions because I already have a large site that is in Mediavine Pro. So there's a nice little carve out which allows me to onboard sites at this lower threshold. So yeah, that's typically this first month would probably actually be, like I said, more like double this just because the traffic would be about 2 times as high. But still, I'm not complaining. Every little bit counts in a portfolio of 45 sites. And yeah, this one's definitely starting to pull its weight. As I mentioned before, the I'm only spend 700 some on this site. So if you factor in the like 500 or so it earned in its sort of piddly AdSense earnings over the past year or so, really the site's already in the black. It's already, cash flow positive. I'm not actually, and I haven't, because of the update, spent any time on the site. Um, I've just been checking sort of for fun the vitals and kind of the Google Search Console dashboard, but not actually doing any work on the site. So this has functioned nicely, but as I'll get into, the update's been quite disruptive for many sites. So let's see how the actual traffic went for this month. So this is the Google Search Console data for this case study site. As you can see, it had pretty good growth, pretty steady in terms of clicks for the first part of the year. Started somewhere just below 250 and kind of steadily went up to about 600-ish. And that was until the March 5th Google algorithm update. As you can see by the red line, that's when the update actually started occurring. So what happened since then? Well, the traffic has more or less, organic search traffic has more or less to actually remain constant. It's down a little bit, but not that much, 10% maybe. So this site I would definitely classify as having survived so far the update. Update's still ongoing, so fingers crossed it continues this way. But it, yeah, basically I had sites that got totally crushed. I've had sites that have been big winners. This is definitely one of the ones I would consider basically within that 10-20% standard margin of error that I allow for pretty much any update. So it definitely wasn't this site being smacked down totally. Just looking at some of the stats, overall the site still is pretty healthy. It has a really high click-through rate, or at least for me, 5.7%. That's definitely above the 3% threshold that I typically use to determine whether I'd add more content, which is why I had planned on adding more this month. Because basically, and with an average position of 9.8, most of the articles are starting to rank fairly high, bottom of first page or top of second page. But yeah, this site looks like the growth was pretty much stunted so far by the update. But again, given how many sites were decimated, uh, I'm going to consider this a victory that the site has continued to plug away. And this is also why you should always apply as soon as you cross the threshold for an ad network, whether it's 25, 50, or whatever thousand sessions. You should always apply right away, because this site, had I waited a little bit longer, and I even debated waiting as it was approaching the Raptive threshold too, trying it there, but the second site add-on with Mediavine occurred first, and that few days would have made a big difference, because although I didn't know the update was coming on March 5th, I knew it was probably coming soon, and yeah, I wanted to get the site on there. So the site also gets some amount of social media and direct traffic just from other experiments I've been doing with it. But so this doesn't represent all the traffic. This is purely Google search. Um, but it's basically right at the threshold. So it's important to always apply as soon as you're eligible, because you never know when something like this will happen. I think I would be still eligible, but I'm like right on the cusp currently. So I'm overall, like I said, pretty happy. Uh, there's, of course, lots of questions, since a lot of people were just destroyed by this update, and I had sites hit too. And I'll get into that in the next section. But I just wanted to give you a look at it. And yeah, I think it's a good example of kind of being able to see, okay, this is a site that, wasn't dramatically impacted one way or the other. Because usually you hear about winners or losers in these updates. A lot of times, though, there are sites that, this might have slowed the growth for a while, but basically the traffic, didn't significantly change one way or the other. So I wanted to go into some of my thoughts on the March 2024 update. I've got a lot of questions from people on my previous videos asking about more broadly how my portfolio is doing. And I've kind of held off answering those because A, the update was still ongoing, but B, I figured I'd post this video at some point. So it seemed like a good time to go through some of this. So kind of the most obvious question is, why do I think this site in particular survived? And this really leads to the second question, which is how many of my sites were overall affected in my portfolio. Because ultimately, while I test a lot of little things, I tend to do single variable tests, meaning I'm trying to figure out causation versus correlation. So you would think I'd have a pretty good handle on if there was some systemic reason that all like my sites were either getting hit or not getting hit, that I would realize it. And there are a couple trends, nothing conclusive, but a couple trends I can offer. So overall, of the 45 or so sites, about half of those sites are what I would say are like the money sites. They're sites that are on a premium ad network like Mediavine or Raptive. There's a few that are just affiliate. There's a couple now that are either digital products or community. One that has a tool. So basically, they generate money in one of, they're all related to the organic traffic, but they all monetize a little bit differently. Still, though, my preferred method of monetization is display ads just because it's simple and yeah, it's really great for this whole AI asynchronous content production model. So, of those 40 sites, 20 are like kind of like this basically. They're built in a similar way, and I use all the principles on those sites. The other 20 are more like experiments. And then to break it down further, I would say overall, about 25% of the sites were probably hit heavily. So that's like heavy to me would be anything over like 30%. So there was one that went down like 90 or 80 some percent. So 30 to 80%, that's a huge range, I know. So maybe 25 we can say were like kind of borderline at least obliviated during this update. But there was then another 25% that were not hit as hard, but were probably just under that 30% range. I would not include this site in that case, mainly just because it really stayed flat. So I had a bunch of sites that saw like a noticeable drop, but it was like 20%. And those are sites that, I can usually look through and I can be like, okay, these sites lost their featured snippets or they lost their image search results. Or I can usually pinpoint, or like they've been replaced by Reddit, posts from 10 years ago. I can usually isolate the cause. Then there's about another 25% of my portfolio that either was flat or slightly up. And I'd include this in there. Obviously, it's not up per se, but I would say it's basically flat. And I do have probably another 25% that are like significantly up. Some of those are the experimental sites, though. So meaning they don't earn a lot of money. So yes, it's great to see a site spike in traffic, but when you have much less traffic, which is the case with the experimental sites, that doesn't really mean that much. It might mean something for whatever you're testing, but I wouldn't say these are winners, or that they represent the financial component of my portfolio. So all that to say, this update was pretty brutal, not just for other people, but for me personally. Uh, I'm lucky for sure in that I definitely didn't have like some people, were actually de-indexed and got like spam manual penalties, seemingly for no reason in some cases. So I didn't have any of that happen. I did have some sites clearly get hit, but it wasn't like they all got obliterated or, that I think that probably by covering so many niches and having so many sort of slight variations of strategy, that probably insulated things a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of an overview of how things went for me during the March update. But yeah, I want to be clear, it definitely did affect me too. And while I'm not out of the game, that it was enough for me to pause content production for the month. Do I think this is the end of blogging, though, or niche sites? Well, I don't like the term niche sites because it's starting to be used in a derogatory way, but I think of what I do as blogging or digital publishing. And no, I don't think this is necessarily the end of that. Um, Basically, what we've seen is that Google really either doesn't know what's going on with its own search results, which, as it's incorporated more and more machine learning, it's entirely possible that they can't quite quantify what is going on, or what, each update. They might have some intended target or some factors they kind of believe they're impacting in the update, but they might just be missing the mark completely. I think they're kind of aware of that. They may not care. That's the bigger problem. But if the other question I get a lot was this a crackdown on AI content? I think the short answer is actually no. There's lots of AI content that also includes many of the problematic characteristics that resulted in content being targeted. But either Google can detect AI, and if so, there's enough sites like mine where they clearly overlooked it, and for what it's worth, they've stated it's not AI content, AI generated content that they're going after per se. It's sort of mass generated, basically spam content. So I don't think the heavily edited AI rough drafts fall under that. So either Google can detect that and they don't care, or they can't detect it. So it doesn't really matter either way. But you know that there's no. I don't know whether they might have been indirectly targeting it. I guess you could say in this update, but I don't think that's really what. I mean, they're facing a lot of problems just in general. Their index is overrun in part because of AI. They're having to crawl so much content. And a big part of that is AI accelerated content production so much. But Google had been having problems leading up to this, and the updates had been getting more volatile over the past few years. And we have seen a few big ones like this before. Like this, for if you're a relatively new blogger, this definitely is like a, magnitude 8, like earthquake kind of event. But uh, if you've been around a while, you probably remember Panda or Medic updates, and those like completely wiped large, swaths of websites off the face of the internet, basically. Um, and so it's not totally unprecedented for Google to have these volatile updates. And that's why I sold my previous site. I didn't know that days later the update would strike, so that was good timing. But it's especially if you're investing money or view this as an investment, websites are a risky thing to be investing in. And sure, it looks great when you see the valuations go up year after year. I remember when it was kind of crazy to get like 20x your monthly income. And sort of at the peak of this, if this is the peak, people were getting, 40 to 50x sometimes their monthly income. But that might have been a bubble. Honestly, I never would have paid that for a site. I never have. And yeah, I think that it's, ultimately people are motivated by greed. They investors kind of got over their skis and saw the fact that they could make back their entire, have this like 1 to 2 year almost payback period, and they kind of went wild with some of these sites. I mean, that was good for people that sold, but it just led to sort of this inflated market. And it Google does it is like, while ads are at the core of their business, Google's already having to contend with rivals like Microsoft, with Bing, and sort of, integrating actual like chat bots, and they're considering SGE and having their own sort of AI search generative experience. So they're going through their own period of tumultuousness. It's entirely possible that this update wasn't specifically meant to destroy niche sites, uh, but that really Google either doesn't care or is so focused on that or the antitrust lawsuits that they just, yeah, they're kind of unaware of this, because ultimately the executives at Google are looking at the stock price, and Google stock is doing actually pretty well. It has, like I said, ads are at the root of it, and they should be considered, but that's not why Google's valued as high as it is. Um, so it's one of those weird things where I think blogging. This is a good reminder that blogging, is a privilege, and frankly is risky if you're making this your entire livelihood. And I always encourage people to de-risk, even if it's just in small ways, whether that's diversifying the actual business model, the monetization model, selling part of your business, selling all of a site. These are things you should ask yourself. If you have a site that generates 90+% of your income, and that site can drop 80% overnight, you're either, you need to be like saving that cash, that really good cash flow every month, and setting aside a lot of money, as basically an insurance policy, or you need to consider selling at some point. Or like I said, something in between, partnering with somebody who buys half of the site or something. You have to be able to manage the risk. If you keep sort of reinvesting all of that money into this really risky asset, that's where you can really get into trouble. Um, so, you can't, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. It's true with most things. It's definitely true when it comes to blogging. That said, I don't think that every site that was hit is permanently out. There's always a chance, like, things could be just like Google kind of shook things up so quickly this month. I don't know why people are so quick to dismiss the possibility they might shake it up again in another update. So if you're depending on, a site for your livelihood, and it's been like just totally obliterated, it might be, I wouldn't fall into the trap of people selling you courses or other things about recovering the site. I think there's very little chance of seeing meaningful recovery quickly. For a lot of us who've taken some money off the table and this is our passion and what we're going to keep doing, it doesn't really matter. The answer is like, we're going to keep publishing, and that's how I know blogging will continue. But not everyone's going to be in that position, and honestly, yeah, it's pretty tough. So I definitely sympathize with everybody who's been impacted. And like I said, I had I had one of my Mediavine ones get hit pretty hard. So I'm definitely familiar with it, but I still think that there's possibility to earn money with blogging. And I think this site's pretty good proof of that. This site was launched in 2023 and only really started making money in 2024. And actually, kind of bad timing in that it was right before the update. It only got like a very short period, like less than a month before an update hit. But even then, this site didn't go to zero. Um, might have slowed the growth, but And I just throw this out there because everyone always makes updates seem like there's huge winners or losers. A lot of times, those are the loudest voices you hear, people bragging about a site skyrocketing and claiming they're a genius, or people that were really devastated and are rightfully upset, complaining. Um, but there's a lot of people that are small business owners doing blogging on the side who are kind of unaware of what's going on, and they're not the loud voices, or they're people like me maybe who have a lot of sites, so they can absorb some of the impact of these updates. But I just wanted to offer, those thoughts and perspectives. I'm not even going to really venture into like what to do. Like I said, I don't think recovery is the right thing to focus on right now. I think you probably need to wait a little bit to get some more data and for the update to completely finish, and even then give it a few weeks to see where the search results settle. But I'm definitely going to continue with this site. I want to see where it goes, and you know I hope you want to continue following along on this journey. Like I said, if this site does get hit or it goes to zero, or whether it goes to 1 million, you can follow along, and you'll get to take part in that journey too. So just like my previous case study was far more successful than I expected, this one, well, I'm still optimistic. It's a tough time to be building in public at all. And I'll be kind of amazed if this site has that same trajectory. But you have to kind of put yourself out there and try. And a lot of people told me the other site was impossible, and that worked out well. So I'm going to keep pushing with this site. I hope you found this video useful. I know I've really enjoyed getting to know everyone who comments and interacts with these videos and asks questions. So if you do have a question, feel free to leave it in the comment section and I'll do my best to get back to you. Obviously, I'm working with a lot of clients and it's a crazy time with the March update. So uh, please allow me a little time to get back to you, but I'll do my best. If you want to learn more or check out some of the free resources I have put together, you can check out my main site, bloggingguide.com. I also have a Substack newsletter, which offers both free and a paid version, but mostly free stuff. So that's bloggingguide.substack.com. And if you just want to follow along on social media, I'm not quite as active there, but you can find me at Casey Botticello. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please be sure to like and subscribe.